All right, folks, greetings to all of you, beloved of God and redeemed by the blood of Jesus Christ, our great shepherd and high priest. Now, we're dealing with this problem of evil speaking or judging one another. This is, of course, the famous passage in James chapter 4, and just two verses, 11 and 12. And we'll briefly consider this is not going to be long, I promise. And but there's an interesting twist to it, to this observation by James, that those that condemn their brothers are condemned themselves on two courts of God's justice, by the law of works and by the law of faith as well. And that latter aspect is not always sufficiently emphasized, in my opinion. So let us first read the sacred text, and then we're going to consider the what it means and what it means to us, the application. So James says, "Speak not evil one of another, brethren. He that speaketh evil of his brother and judgeth his brother speaketh evil of the law and judgeth of the law. But if thou judge the law, thou art not a doer of the law, but a judge. There is one lawgiver who is able to save and to destroy. Who art thou that judgest another?" And here we have just, right off the bat, we encounter this problem of judging. And the difficulty which borderlines with an impossibility. On the one hand, we are to make rational judgments, and things that are ill-deserving in nature are to be judged as evil. We're not to call black white or vice versa, white as black. We're not to call evil good or good evil. So, and when Jesus himself speaketh in the Sermon on the Mount in chapter 7 of the Gospel of Matthew, "Judge not that ye be not judged," he is not saying that we're to suspend all moral judgment or assessment of actions and thoughts of moral agents, such as men and angels. When people do that, which is evil in God's sight, that is an evil thing, and it's to be called that for what it is. So, but there is a thin ground between judging and condemning, and this is what James has in view, particularly in reference to the brethren. He says, "Speak not evil one of another, brethren, and lest we be again in kind of suspended as to the precise meaning of this speaking evil." He means this condemnation, condemning one another. Okay, judgmentalism with the view of actually condemning somebody. He says, "He that speaketh evil of his brother and judgeth his brother speaketh evil of the law." Now, why is that? Well, first of all, speaking evil, the malicious talk, slandering, bad-mouthing somebody is for the most part done in order to harm them. It is the ultimate expression of a lack of love, or the contrary, the active hatred towards your neighbor. Remember, even in the Ten Commandments, "Thou shalt not bear false witness." Now, the problem with the false witness is that it's not just speaking random evil stuff about your neighbor. It is bearing false witness, and which means slandering them, making them guilty that they be put to death. So, by bearing this false witness, you show that you actually hate thy neighbor and you want to get rid of them. So that's the gist of that commandment, the application thereof. So it's not just random giving the full of lying, but it is with the intent of harming thy neighbor. So the same thing here too, speaking evil in order to slander or ruin the reputation, or even judging them as condemned or unsaved. He says, "Speak not evil one of another, brethren. he that speaketh evil of his brother and judgeth his brother speaketh evil of the law. Now, why is that? Why is that when we speak, when we judge or actually condemn our brothers for whatever action, we speak evil of the law and we judge the law? And I would say we judge the law of works. The first signification of this word is the law of 10 commandments, or all of God's commandments given to us by his revelation, which show God's either favoring some actions and thoughts of men and angels or disfavoring or condemning their actions. So whatever is judged by the law is evil, therefore is evil. But when you speak evil of your brother and you judge your brother, you thereby speak evil of the law. How come? Well, it means that you judge the law itself as either insufficiently harsh or by the very action of bad-mouthing, condemning thy brother, you communicate that you actually are a better law keeper than this person who has committed such a scandalous sin. And of course, when I was dealing with this passage I think it's even 3 Sundays ago, that I gave a little sermon on this particular passage, it was still the repercussions of this scandal concerning this huge name in some evangelical circles, Reformed Baptists, of course, Stephen Lawson. And I wouldn't want to bring his name up or just to just mention him, but just an example. This is a direct instance. It's not so much his actions that I'm going to be talking about, but the reaction, response among evangelicals and the so-called Reformed Baptists and those who follow John MacArthur, that ilk, the Lordship Salvationists. Boy, they just went out of the way to condemn their former guru and somebody who they looked up to, and they said, well, look, he brought this inestimable damage to reputation and so forth. They showed this that he did not live up to his standards, which is true, but they went on to condemn and to even cancel his his books, lectures, sermons, and everything that he produced. That's a huge scandal, especially among Lordship Salvationists, to which Cam himself belonged. And of course, whatever happened, that scandalous sin, of course, revealed that he did not actually live up to his own preaching of fully submitting himself to the will of God, fully receiving Christ not only as the Savior, but also as Lord, and therefore taking the full commitment to follow Christ. I mean, all that stuff. I mean, the teaching of the Lordship Salvation says, all those demands that only those who actually serious about being obedient to all of the demands and of Christ, only they will be saved and so forth. So he did not live up to this idea of the full commitment and of Lordship Salvation. And that is ironic, and that is self-condemned. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that it is the reaction of the so-called larger Christian and evangelical society environment, which just went berserk about his sin. Boy, this is such a huge scandal and so forth that, and some even went as far as to say that, well, maybe he was never of us, because that sin showed that he was never actually truly committed to Christ wholeheartedly, and therefore he may have been a hypocrite. Well, be that as it may, we're not to make fun of him. But see, this is a a glaring instance of speaking evil and judging the brother. Now, whether or not this individual is among God's children, it's not of mine to decide. But the evil side to it, when people began to, well, gossip and just discuss and then condemn, well, he probably is not a true believer. Well, according to his own gist of what he was saying, if you heard any of his sermons, he judges himself. But when people around him, from his audience and those who have been influenced by his prolific teaching ministry and so on, when they judge him and speak evil of him, there are direct examples of what James is speaking here in the passage. So he that speaketh evil of his brother, Steve Lawson in parenthesis, whether or not he's a true, that's immaterial, but he's considered to be a professing believer and all that. Thou art, and judges his brother, speaketh evil of the law. Why? Well, again, see, there's two courts of justice here in this passage, at least in the eyes of the present commentator, that it's not just the judging by the law of works. Yes, well, that speaker, that evangelical teacher is condemned by the law, and we know that the law is spiritual, we're carnal. It's not just him committing those sins. Jesus goes much deeper in the Sermon on the Mount, that he that looketh at a woman to lust has already committed that adultery. So, but the problem when we begin to gossip and judge, well, so-and-so teacher is probably unsaved and all that. What we're saying is that they're not only condemned at the court of law of works, but we also judge the law of faith. Well, as to the law of works, when we condemn it, we say, well, surely this person is so-and-so, they can't be a true believer and all that. We show thereby that we make ourselves to differ from other men. When we, anybody, just in general, condemn people who fall into scandalous sins and point our self-righteous fingers at them, we thereby judge the law as, first of all, kind of insufficient to expose the sins of such scandalous sinners. And we try to put on a show that we have been, at least we have been, not as guilty, because we have not fallen into such scandalous sins as this person. So we can, have it nice and cozy in condemning such persons. And gossip is a deadly thing. And we all have this sinful propensity to engage in that. And the psychological reason why we love such scandals is that psychologically deep inside, we rejoice. And it's an evil rejoicing, really, that, boy, we haven't been caught as this guy has been, and therefore we can talk about them. Boy, that is a deadly blow to his reputation, his ministry, and all that. And we think that kind of shifts the attention from us. But Paul addresses the same problem as far as judging by the law of works. The Old Testament law, the Ten Commandments, the ministration of death, and so forth. He says that in chapter 2 of Romans, he speaks about it at length. You that teach others, don't you teach yourself? You say, well, men should not do this. Aren't you guilty of the same thing? Because you that condemn others are guilty of that same thing yourself. So how come? I haven't committed such scandalous sins, but you have entertained evil thoughts. And as far as the verdict of the law, you're just as guilty. And you're not going to get away with just, well, look, I haven't actually committed in the broad daylight, but you've had evil intentions. You haven't loved God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength and understanding, nor has thou loved thy neighbor as thyself. And therefore you've already standing guilty and all that. But it's not just the speaking evil and judging the law of works. And we do that when we condemn people, especially the professing believers, because the context is not to condemn your brother. But it also, the evil effect is that you become the judge of the law of faith or the law of liberty, to which James alludes earlier in chapter 2. So speak and act as those that will be judged by the law of liberty, not the law of Ten Commandments. The law of Ten Commandments is not the law of liberty. It condemns you. It is function, design is to condemn and nothing else. The Ten Commandments is not the law of liberty. The law of liberty is the law of faith. If you've been delivered from the curse, the condemnation of the law, you've been free from it. That's the whole argument of Paul in Romans, particularly in chapters 6 and 7, partly 8 as well. He speaks about it at length. So if you've been delivered from the condemnation of the law, so speak and act as those who will be judged on by this law of liberty, i.e. the gospel. But when we condemn, be it Stephen Lawson or anybody else, what we do is that we say, boy, this guy is just, he is irredeemable, you know. He's too bad of a person. We, however, are walking in faithfulness, whatever that means, and so forth. So, see what we're doing when we're condemning people who've been caught, admittedly, in a scandal. So I'm not trying to minimize or say, well, that's nothing. No, it is a big deal. But the problem is that when we join this course of self-righteous condemnation of such people as that, we thereby make ourselves to differ as well, something better about us. So we bear the false witness about the gospel which we profess to believe, as though there was something better about us. But the only difference between you and Lawson is that you haven't been caught, or you haven't been actually caught in the implementation of those lustful thoughts. But we're all, in some fashion or other, guilty of breaking the law. But again, it's when we speak evil of your brother and judging, we speak evil of the law of the Ten Commandments because we find it sort of insufficient. He has to be judged and so forth, but we sit in judgment upon the law of faith. You know, I marvel would be a good word. I marvel at how quick to judge the tendencies among us. So, well, this can't be, and I've done that myself. I'm just as guilty as anybody in this condemning business. You know, well, this guy, he can be a true believer because the true believer would have never, but when you consider what you're actually saying, all right, this guy was guilty of having this inappropriate relationship, whatever that was. Well, how about David? He not only was guilty of not just having a random thought about having somebody else, somebody other than his wife. He actually went and did it. And then he also committed premeditated murder because he sent Uriah to a certain death, and he actually saw to it that he got killed in the heat of the battle. You know the story of David, but the point is that he tried to hide that sin. And only when it was no longer possible, when Nathan confronted him, and he also got tired and grew weary of his own keeping silent, even his bones were heavily afflicted because the hand of the Lord was heavy upon him. He speaks about it in Psalm 31. I believe it was the reminiscent of what he went through, having committed this. But the point is that biblical heroes, and David, of course, a man of God's own heart, he was guilty not only of adultery, he went and killed Uriah, and he tried to hide it. So, shall we say that, well, he was not a true believer because a true believer would have never done this thing? Or Solomon? You take many others. I mean, Peter was guilty not only of 3 times denying his Lord with cursing, so not much difference between him and Judas. He also then played a hypocrite, and Paul talks about it in Galatians chapter 2. So he was not walking according to the truth of the gospel. So the point I'm trying to make is that actions are to be judged aright. We're not to suspend our moral judgment. We're not to call evil good or good evil or say, well, we don't really know. That's not what Jesus is saying. That's not what James is saying. But we're not to bring the accusations. We're not to be devil's advocates and say, well, this person, certainly, surely, and all that. We're not to say those things because then we judge the law, and not only the law of works, but also the law of faith, as though there's something better about us, that we're not as this person, as those sinners, and so forth. So then we create our own self-righteous ways or stairways to heaven. Boy, we've been faithful. We've been obedient. We've been, and again, see, it's ridiculous. People speak about progressive sanctification. Well, how about this huge, scandalous failure? How does it play out? How much time do you have now to make up for this huge downfall? Does that negate all those years of this making little progress on sanctifying yourself? Whoops! Now you have to make it up. Will you have enough time on earth to compensate? Well, we don't know, but we just know. And sometimes I've noticed over the years that we should tremble. By the way, this is not to be taken lightly, but I have noticed that God has His way of exposing our false hopes, and progressive sanctification is a false hope. The Lordship salvation is a false doctrine, and sometimes He has to teach us the hard way. But the application in the lessons to be taken from those hard lessons of life is not to say, aha, so he must be this, he must be outside of the pale of salvation and so forth. He's downright hypocrite. So let's cancel all his teaching. We're better than. No, the teaching is that we're to take heed to ourselves. We're no better. We just haven't been exposed. We haven't been led into temptation because the Lord, in His goodness and mercy, has not sent to it. Or maybe there hasn't been we don't know what's around the corner. But the point is that we're all condemned in the court of law of works, and we're all, without any merit whatsoever, in the court of the law of faith, the law of liberty. So when we talk about it, yes, we say, well, adultery is an awful thing. It is what it is. But at the same time, if it weren't for the grace of God, there go I and all of us. And we're to use it as an occasion to preach the gospel to every creature, to ourselves as well, because we're just as desperately wicked apart from the grace of God as anybody. If David was able to do that, boy, and he was given so much, remember, a good portion of the Psalms, which we're supposed to sing and meditate and pray and so forth in the Bible, penned by the guy who went and had this thing and then proceeded to kill the lawful husband and so forth. So he committed this horrible sin. So the object lesson for us is that we're not to take confidence in the flesh in any shape or form. And we're not to speak evil. We're not to condemn. It's not our business. Our business rather is to admonish one another, to comfort one another, and to preach the gospel, including ourselves. What is our only hope of salvation? Is it our being faithful, of being obedient? We delude ourselves if we say so. So, and he concludes in verse 12, there's one lawgiver who's able to save and to destroy. Who art thou that judgest another? One lawgiver who gave the law of works in due time. Again, not that people might be saved by it. It was never the purpose of the law, but to reveal our condition, our sinfulness, our deadness to it, and so forth, in order to guide us to tutor us to Christ, and then who gave us also the law of faith. He's able to save and to do so. Who art thou that judgest or condemnest another? Because that's what James has in view, is the sin of condemnation. So that's that, and it's easier said than to be done. And here's the bottom line. Again, we're not to suspend the moral judgment. Wicked actions are to be judged and assessed as wicked as for what they are. It's a breach of the law. It's a serious offense. Both in the Old Testament and New Testament, it's just not much difference. If anything, Jesus made it harder for us in the demand to love one another and to love a neighbor and so forth. It's just the stakes are higher. But the point is that we're to call evil evil and good good, but we're not to condemn our brothers. And we're not to try to make ourselves look or feel better, because that's the I guess the deep root of it. Why people love when they find somebody a criminal, somebody maniac. Boy, they just need to be burned, killed, mollified, as just anything, and all this self-righteous wrath and condemnation, because thereby we want to make ourselves look better. We're not that bad. We're better. And therefore, it is a false gospel on our part if we preach, if we say it. So, we do say that certain actions are evil because God says they're evil, but nevertheless, we're not saying that, well, we're not better, not one whit, that God's law is so perfect that he goes into the innermost parts, so as to even reveal our hidden motives, intents of the heart, and our thoughts, and all of those. And since our hearts are desperately evil and wicked, we're all in the same boat as far as standing with God. And apart from Christ, we have absolutely no hope. So we're to preach the gospel, both to others and to ourselves, and take occasion to thank God for his grace, for his mercy to us, and that if he's dealing with us on the basis of the law of faith, not the law of works, that law of works condemns us all. Every one of us stands condemned. So that's the teaching of this little passage of James chapter 4, verses 11 through 12. May the Lord bless us all that we may abide in this teaching and take it to heart, meditate upon it, and may it lead us to repentance and greater faith and appreciation of Christ's gospel, whereby we're saved from condemnation. Amen.